As a special treat, your movie this week is a little bit of a change of pace. It's about a bunch of astronauts who go on a space mission back in the 50s. It's called 12 to the Moon. But first, a little musical acid trip from our friends at General Motors called Design for Dreaming.
This time we watched Season 5, Episode 24, 12 to the Moon.
In which an international coalition sends 12 scientists to the moon to explore and, of course, save the world.
Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, there's also a short called Design for Dreaming.
Ooh, but first, some follow-up.
Well, but first, happy Labor Day, which I guess is fault because we're recording this well after Labor Day. So
It's true. Did you have a wonderful Labor Day, Chris?
I don't remember. I think I did. I think it was all right. Yeah, it must have been because it was a Monday, which meant it was D&D night. So I got to play a game with my friends. It's not D&D. We're playing a game called Magical Kitties Save the Day, and all my friends get to play as little kitties. And what a lovely way to spend Labor Day.
Fantastic. That does sound like a really wonderful way to spend your Labor Day.
Now, you are in your sort of daytime job, you are a high school teacher.
It's true, I am.
So Labor Day is like, get yourself back to work times.
Yeah, I in fact labor on Labor Day pretty much every year because it is the last day off before school officially starts. And so I always feel like, oh my gosh, there's a million last minute things I have to do, or I'm not going to feel prepared when the students actually walk in the door. So yeah, Labor Day is always a day that I labor to be prepared for my job. It's like pre-Labor Day. I don't know.
Yeah. Doesn't sound like you're getting paid for that, but I guess it's complicated.
It is complicated. You have taught, it is not an easy job. And sometimes you feel like, oh, if I just had 24 hours more to prepare, but you feel that at every moment, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
And other jobs have that too. I am not the only job that always feels like there was more.
You are not the only job.
That's right.
So normally for Labor Day, we celebrate the original dodeca laborer, Hercules, who went out and did the 12 labors as part of his big bid for demigodhood or something. I don't know. But we've done all the Hercules movies. We've done all the Machiste movies that MST3K has looked at, unless I'm forgetting one, in which case, hey, that'll make things much easier next year. So this time around, we're just doing a movie with 12 in the title, because why not?
Why not? That seems like a perfectly fine way to remember Hercules.
Exactly. And to celebrate Labor Day. But we should say there's a little bit of follow-up. On our last episode, we were looking at the Phantom Planet, and we got some messages from a few people, including Ned and Patrick on a Discord, who pointed out that Sesom is just Moses spelled backwards.
And I know that you were debating whether this was something that the writers of the movie were actually intentionally doing. Did you ever find any evidence that it was intentional or not?
I did not, but he had just played Moses a few years earlier in a film called The Story of Mankind. So maybe it has something to do with that. I don't know. It doesn't really fit, but people name things for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah, and maybe it was just inspiration. And he's like, well, I can't call him Moses. Then people will think he's actually, Moses, and you can't have that sort of thing. So, we'll just run it backwards. Why not?
Yeah, why not? All right, but that is enough tidying up from previous episodes. Let's talk about this because there's a lot to talk about with this one.
That sounds excellent. This time we watch Season 5, Episode 24, 12 to the Moon.
But first, a short Design for Dreaming. A woman sleeps, but then in creeps a man with a fabulous plan. It's free admission to an exhibition, to a show devoted to tomorrow. And so, with ecstatic euphoria, North Astoria Hotel to see the latest Corvettes, Buicks, and Pontiacs, Oldsmobiles, and Cadillacs. But beyond your 5-car garage, you'll soon be able to take charge. In the kitchen of tomorrow, press a button and you'll make a birthday cake. It's all automated. And speaking of automated, the man and the woman drive off on the electronic highway of the future. And I'm sure that's a metaphor, but for now, that's the end.
Oh my God, you're amazing. And now for our feature presentation. In an unexpected show of international solidarity instead of competition, the nations of the Earth band together to send a single international mission to the moon. 12 people of extraordinary academic pursuits have been gathered from throughout the world to travel to the moon together. I'm reminded of that Donovan song where, knowing her fate, Atlantis sends out the 12, the poet, the physician, the farmer, the scientist, the magician, and the other so-called gods of our legends. To introduce our 12, we get a "let's meet the cast" as they check in for flight. We don't have a poet per se, but we do get some folks with expertise in communication, as well as rocket building, mathematics, engineering, geology, medicine, both regular and the space kind, photography, and leadership. I guess that's what the beefy guy from the US brings, because he's unanimously chosen to be the leader. These folks get launched towards the moon. They have to avoid weird magnetic fields and clusters of meteors. They take space pictures of the Earth and stuff and keep a space log of what's going on. You'd think they'd leave the tensions between nations behind them on such a momentous journey, but no, they squabble. I mean, we do have a German and an Israeli on board just after World War II. We have an American and a Russian in the middle of the Cold War. I mean, it's kind of amazing they work together as well as they do. The crew lands on the moon and begins to explore. They break into a couple of groups to wander the near vicinity, and by that I mean a couple and the rest of the group. The Swedish woman and one of the guys find a cave with plants and air, which is weird, right? But not as weird as them taking off their helmets, kissing, and wandering into a cave. Hot scientists. You just can't keep them from falling in love. The other group heads back to the spaceship, hoping the lovers will return soon. And unfortunately, along the way, the British guy falls into quicksand and dies. Back at the ship, more weird things start happening. The moon starts to get real cold, like -200 degrees outside, cold. And the communication screen starts to scroll a message in an unknown symbolic language, which fortunately the Japanese woman can read. It's from the moon people, and it says, "We've read your minds, you're hostile, and you suck, so leave your cats and get out of here. P.S. We're keeping your friends." The remaining 9 launch back towards the Earth, but find the moon people are freezing North America in a show of power. To save everyone, the group aboard the rocket select 2 of them to head down to Earth and toss a bunch of little atom bombs into a volcano. Yes, you heard me right. Dropping atomic bombs into a volcano to unfreeze North America. It works a little, I guess, but the 2 die on the mission, and the moon people are so impressed by our capacity to love and our willingness to self-sacrifice that they decide to leave us in peace and not freeze us again. The end.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, GPC is hosting a tea party, and Mike is the guest of honor. Tom and Crow watch the awkwardness as Mike tries to make small talk with her about designing women, despite the fact that he doesn't watch Designing Women. Awkward. Much less awkward, somehow, is TV's Frank hosting Deep 13's annual celebrity roast. This time, we're roasting Dr. Clayton Forrester. Frank holds nothing back when roasting Dr. F, who eventually responds the only way he knows how, with violence. Back on the satellite, Mike and the bots are playing Canadian doubles tennis, and Tom throws a tantrum at GPC's adjudication. Unfortunately for him, she was right. That ball was clearly out. After some movie, Mike and the bots are pretending to be an international space crew when who should pop in but an all-singing, all-dancing Nuvina, woman of the future. She asks Mike to dance with him, but she can only hear him when he sings. And then she wants to take him and the bots to the future. Amazing! Mike and the bots pack their stuff to head off with Nuvina. Turns out Crow has several crates filled with spec scripts and sensible slacks. But GPC has her doubts about this strange dancing woman, and sure enough, after a little while, Nuvina's converted the bots into the kitchen of tomorrow. Crow's a standing mixer, and Tom's a futuristic oven. Nuvina's insistence on treating the bots like appliances turns out to be the last straw, and Mike says he won't go with her. She takes the rejection poorly. And after the movie, Mike realizes that he's lost his last chance at love in space. So he enjoys the next best thing, letters from viewers. You know, they really do love to hear from you. Back in Deep 13, Nuvina shows up and hits on Frank, but Frank keeps pestering her for a croissant, and so she pops back out. Keep trying, Nuvina. There's gotta be someone out there for you. What do you think, sirs? I mean, okay, so that short is
amazing.
So good.
Amazing! Yes!
I mean, the whole episode is pretty great. The short, the sketches, the movie is kind of interesting, I thought.
I guess, sure.
But also kind of boring.
Yeah, it seems really weird that they were sending 12 people to the moon, but we really only got to know 2 or 3 of them. You know?
There's a reason why most movies don't have 12 main characters. Although, you've probably seen the Ocean's movies, like Ocean's 12.
Yeah, of course I've seen the Ocean's movies. But by the time they got to Ocean's 12, they had already established 11 of the characters. So, that really helped.
I know, but they had to establish 11 of them in one movie.
Yeah. But to be fair, most people, they'd seen the original Ocean's 11, so they had some sort of background with this whole Rat Pack thing. So quite honestly, they didn't have to, do a whole lot of setup for all of this thing. And it's a heist movie. Do you really need to know everybody in a heist movie? Although now that I'm thinking about it, all my favorite heist movies have all of these people in it who have very specific different sets of skills. So you do get to know all of them because each of their skill sets, adds to the completion of the crime in a way that, has some flamboyance and awesomeness. So yeah, no, maybe heist movies are the way that you have to have a large cast.
Well, I mean, the point of a heist movie is to have all of these people under intense pressure, and therefore their personality quirks get magnified because of the pressure.
Oh, that's one way you could do it, sure. I mean, I'm thinking of the Ocean's 11, and what do you have? You have a person who can go into a whole bunch of different costumes.
We cannot list all 11 people in this movie.
But if nothing else, you have people who have different expertise. So they each have very specific things. I'm also thinking of 12 Angry Men, which it's not a heist movie, but it's also a movie where you have 12 people, all of whom have to be separate and distinct. And so you give them different pieces of, different pieces of the argument and different evolutions in changing their minds and things, right? So you can do it in a way that gives all 12 people personality and it's a big cheat. And the Ocean's movies totally use that, right? It's a big cheat to have people who are different nationalities to be able to distinguish them and give them different personalities or maybe different accents. And they kind of do this in the 12 to the Moon, but not really. Everybody kind of looks like a white guy except for 2 of them.
Right.
Okay, 3. But seriously, and all the white guys, they just blended together for me, Chris. Like I feel really bad, but I don't really know what the Brazilian specifically was doing, but there was a Brazilian and there was a guy from Turkey and there was a thing for him, but like the guy from Nigeria, totally knew him because he had a different skin color. So it made it easy to distinguish him as a character, but they also gave him an actual personality. So that was helpful too.
Come on, you must have already been familiar with some of them. Did you recognize anyone?
No. Was I supposed to? I was supposed to.
Yes.
God darn it.
You absolutely were, because Dr. Vargas, the Brazilian, is played by Anthony Dexter, a.k.a. Heron from the previous movie, the guy who, our hero fights and then befriends.
Okay.
And the guy who plays the Polish-Israeli guy, the one of the characters that actually is memorable, is the guy who's been thinking about the beautiful and the good.
But it's just not helpful to me. I don't know why. I guess even with my semi-sticky brain, none of that really stuck in there for me to take a look at these guys. And I'm trying to take their performances and their characters as they're coming so that I can see how it meshes into the plot of this particular movie. It just, they even try to have a young kid who's like a mathematical genius on here so that they can make some commentary about, youth and genius or something. I don't know. Let's the riffers bring up Doogie Howser, which I'm always pro.
And he was a mathematician, which I know you're fond of.
Yes, I am very fond of the math and the mathematicians. It is true. But, basically they just kind of made him do multiplication in his head and they're like, ooh.
It's true. And they already had the answer. They were just testing him on it. Oh, man. So there's that scene that really frustrated me in the Phantom Planet. There's a scene where the captain just shouts out a few numbers about let's turn the ship, turn it to azimuth 270 or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you have to do a lot of math. And here you get to see a better version of that, but not a very realistic one.
No.
Go to Rocket Ship XM if you want a whole scene about math in space in this time period. It's a pretty good moment. Hey, the other thing about the young mathematician is that he is the only character who we don't hear where he's from.
Oh, that's right, because he's just at 19. He's the youngest on the mission, and he's like a math genius. Yeah, you're right.
Yes. Now, this led me to have a little headcanon that because we don't hear where he's from, he must be from Canada.
Good work. That's how you bring the CanCon in, right?
Yeah, except that I noticed upon rewatching that in the scene at the very beginning where they've got all the different place settings and they've got little placards telling you where each person is from, there are 2 people from the USA.
Oh.
So he is American. So what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Hey, one more familiar face type thing.
Okay.
One actor in this film, one of our 12, only has this movie as an acting credit on IMDb. Can you guess which one?
The Japanese woman?
No.
The Swedish woman?
Absolutely not. Annalisa was a bit of a thing. She was even on Bonanza at one point. So also she was Norwegian, but she played Swedish. I think that's fine. I think that's not cultural appropriation. No, it's our Nigerian, of course.
Oh, yes, yes.
One of the few memorable characters from this movie is the actor who didn't get any further work as far as we know. Oh, well.
Which is kind of a shame. I thought he did a really good job. He got to call everything evil. I always love the person in the cast who does that, right? I love the person who gets to read the edge of the sarcophagus and be like, this is cursed, that is cursed, we are cursed, this is evil. I love it. Love it.
I appreciate that they had a moment when they make it that the Nigerian astronomer thanks Allah for this having happened, and the Russian, I think, says, "Oh, you should thank the ship. Don't thank Allah." And the riffers are like, "He can thank whoever he wants."
Yes.
Yes, that is the correct answer there.
It's true. It's true. Although so I put this in my notes, so you probably read it, but when they very first go and they're introducing everybody, they introduce the Russian scientist as a theologist?
No, a geologist.
Yes, no, he's a geologist, but the closed captions, which I always have on when I watched, have it as a theologist. And so I wrote it in my notes like, theologist? What the heck? Like, people in the USSR are not into theology. Like, it's one of the tenets of communism. Why would he be a theologist? And then, of course, later on, when they're talking to him, they're like, yeah, your work's not going to start till we get to the moon because you're a geologist. And I'm like, oh, that's closed captioning, like causing weird things in my brain that didn't need to happen. If I had just been listening to it, I probably wouldn't have made that mistake. But it is interesting that he's reacting to a religious statement of another one of the passengers.
Yes. It is much clearer that he's introduced as a geologist when you watch the Unrift movie.
Which you did?
Well, I spot checked it for things like this.
Oh, fair enough.
But it is a bit unfortunate that, there's a lot of people in the MST3K community who would happily volunteer their time and energy to make sure that everybody could have better official subtitles at the Gizmoplex or wherever else, YouTube, whatever else. And we kind of need it, or at least it would be really nice to have them be a bit more accurate.
It's true.
It's a shame that can't seem to happen.
So Navina, the woman of the future, when she is inside of the short, she gets all of these beautiful cars, and they're like, of course, we're going to buy you all of these cars. And then you get the kitchen of the future. And I just wanted to say out loud what does she do with all of the extra time that she has because the kitchen of the future is baking the cake for her at the push of a button? She has a trying on outfits montage, a shopping montage, essentially. This is what women are going to do when they have extra time?
Well, some of that might be shopping, but I'm pretty sure she puts on the tennis outfit, and you're supposed to understand that as she has time to play tennis. It's standing in for spending an hour playing tennis. And then I forget the other one. She relaxes at the beach, and there's one more that golf? She does golf, I think?
She has wardrobe changes.
Well, that's how they represent it, because it's a dance fantasia.
Sure. I'm just saying, this is not a woman of the future, Chris. I feel like I want her to be doing something more with her time.
But she also has to show you the clothing of the future.
The clothing of the future doesn't look very different from the clothing of right now.
No, it's true, because the clothing of the future that we get to see is sort of haute couture designers that they, shout out that it's...
Christian Dior. Yeah. Oh, no, they do that later. I mean, her thing is like her little athleisure wear and everything.
But that's the same thing. They're advertising all of this stuff, right? Like that's what this is
the most amazing advertisement. It's true.
So these are all part of the General Motors Motorama exhibit. This is a film that was made as something that you'd see at the Motorama exhibit. So all of these fashionable clothing and relaxed lifestyles. And I guess the kitchen stuff must have been part of it. I'm not entirely clear on exactly how that fits in, because it is primarily a car show.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, but there's this huge portion of the car show that is all about appliances and things that women are going to be able to use in the kitchen. So I don't know. Do you need to be freed from your chores in the kitchen to be able to enjoy your new car? Is that part of what they're trying to sell? Is you now have more leisure time to do other things, and that's why your household will need a second car?
Okay. This just in. I finally, even while we're talking, I'm still trying to frantically Google this thing I was looking for. And I found it this time. Frigidaire did have an exhibit for the Kitchen of Tomorrow that was part of Motorama. That's why it's there.
That is so odd.
Well, it's very Epcot, right? It's very, let's see what tomorrow is, and make our cars look even cooler and more futuristic by pairing it with this weird cake making device and your sort of iPad of a cooking screen that'll just make the cooking for you like it's some sort of cooking AI and
like it's the thing that you get food from in the Starship Enterprise. You just push a button and you say what you want.
Exactly. So yeah, the General Motors Motorama was an auto show that would go on during the 40s and 50s and into the early 60s. And it took place at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, which we get to see here.
That is so wild. What a weird place to have a car show.
Yeah, it's a little weird. The ballroom at the Waldorf Astoria seems to be massive. It's 43,000 square feet of space, according to the website. And it says it's got a full loading bay. So I guess you could drive a bunch of cars in there. I don't know. It's not where I would have thought to put it, but they made it work, I guess. Anyway, the other interesting thing about these car shows like the Motorama is that it's a place where you get to see concept cars, the cars of the future, which are never made or almost never made for purchase. They're only there to sort of inspire you to think, oh yeah, Cadillac's real cool because they've got this concept car of the future that's completely wild. I don't generally care about cars, which is why I had such a poor time doing research on this topic,
That's
even
fair.
though I'm fascinated by the story behind this. But I will say, when I was a kid, I picked up something. I don't know what it was. I can't figure out what it was, but it was like a book or booklet or magazine insert or something. And it was all about the future, and it included some concept cars. And they were super exciting because they were super futuristic looking and cool. They weren't just like, I don't know, fast cargo Vroom or something. Which, sure, like I get why people like them, but that doesn't do it for me. But there was something about it looks like the future, in the way that the Cybertruck fails to do.
Ooh, yeah.
But the Batmobile still succeeds in it, which, that was
Yes!
based on a classic concept car.
And why everybody still wants to see every iteration of the Batmobile.
Well, I mean, the original Batmobile, the one from the Adam West show. The other ones might also be concept cars. I don't know.
They totally are, and people love to take a look at them. When I went cross country with my family in the 80s, we went to a car museum in Dearborn, Michigan. And the reason we went there, it's the Henry Ford Museum, so it's all of these cars. And one of the things that we did as a family is we went around and we looked at all the cars, and they had presidential cars, and they had one of Elvis Presley's cars as well. And they had classic cars from the 30s and the 40s. And inside of the photo album of my family's trip from the 80s is a picture of myself at the age of 14 in front of the car that was my favorite inside of this museum. And there's one of my sister in front of the one that was her favorite. Anyway, the cars that we that appealed to us the most were not the ones that were the future cars, although they had some of the concept cars there too. I think these ones that are designed to be what cars could be in the future. But the ones that we really liked the best were the ones that were super shiny, really pretty, good colors, but also just classic cars from the 30s or 40s that were just really beautiful, but not futuristic. It's a very different aesthetic.
Yeah, the cars that are pre 1930, pre 1920, especially, which are at this museum, which I haven't been to myself, but I've seen sort of videos taken in it. Those old cars are futuristic in their own way. They're futuristic at the time while also sort of deeply tied into the aesthetics of that time. But they are just gorgeous. They're amazing works of art, and they were, for the most part, until the Model T, they were all bespoke, right? They're all handmade. They're all assembled by they all have 12 parts to them. It's ridiculous.
I know. What an amazing thing it would be to think about the car of the future when cars were less than 2 years old, less than 5 years old, when almost nobody owned them. At that point in time, how do you dream of a future where everybody owns a car and then push it further to think about that car being on a cyber highway or something like that? It's incredible to me that people were able to imagine that future.
The car that they end the short in is called the Firebird 2, and the whole electronic highway thing, was meant to be sort of like a slot car. You can sort of tell that it had a little hook that was supposed to go into a groove that would be built in these highways of the future that would sort of pop you around based on avoiding traffic or slowdowns or getting off on your exit or something like that. Like it would be hooked up to a smart internet kind of thing.
Oh my gosh. That would be awesome.
Yeah, that obviously never happened. And so they never activated it on the model, I guess. But
I guess,
that
yeah.
was the idea. That was their dream for what the future would be like. It would be like we'd all be on trams.
Yes. And we wouldn't have to like navigate all of the like anger making that driving can give us. Like it is a very like anxiety ridden activity. So, and you have to like navigating traffic is never very fun. And of course we live in a society where many of our cities have like hours and hours and hours of commuting traffic for everyone. To be in a car where something else is in control of that and is just going to take you through the best route. I mean, it's like having Siri drive your car instead of just tell you the direction to go. But I understand we still have a lot of anxiety about driverless cars as well.
Yeah, for pretty good reason, I think.
Sure, yes.
But we should probably also have a little more anxiety about bedrivered cars as well.
I think we have plenty of anxiety about the drivered cars.
I think not enough people have enough anxiety about it, but yes.
This is potentially true. This is part of why driving is such a difficult thing, is there's just some people who are like, this road is mine and everybody else is just in my way. I don't know. It's really hard for me sometimes when I drive to let go of that anxiety because you think there's people in front of you and you're like, oh, you're keeping me from getting from where I'm supposed to be. Like you're making me late. And it's just like you're never first anytime you're driving. Like there's always somebody in front of you. You're never first. So you really just got to let that stuff go. It's hard though.
So one of the things that I do find interesting about 12 to the Moon is the way that it depicts the international politics of going into space.
Yes, I think it is really interesting. Well, I talked about it in my summary. Like they squabble, but I'm surprised at how well they actually get along as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised that they have the dream of having this be an international endeavor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that goes against the narrative about the late 50s, early 60s space race that I grew up with. This movie's from 1960. It is right in the middle of that. And it's interesting that they think, oh, maybe we should be doing this more internationally and doing it as a gesture for peace. Maybe that would be possible.
I mean, seriously, it's only like, what, a year later when President Kennedy is going to say something like, we, meaning the U.S., will put a man on the moon in this decade, not we, the collective nations of the world in cooperation, but as a mark of competition. Because that was one of his promises as president.
Yeah. So the story, as I was always told, was sort of, U.S. had worked with the USSR to beat the Nazis in World War II, but as they're left as the two big superpowers, they have two different economic and political ideologies, and so they're battling various types of proxy wars, both literal and figurative, to show their superiority, and one of these is going to be space exploration.
Yeah.
And they're battling over satellites, and 1955, the U.S. says, we're going to send up some satellites, and the USSR is like, hey, that's a good idea. And then they go and do it faster. And they get Sputnik up in 1957. And then a month later, they send up Sputnik 2, which has Laika the dog in it, and she doesn't make it.
Uh-huh.
And that gets mentioned in the movie. They make fun of the Russians for not being able to bring their animals back down to Earth.
Yes. Now that we're all working together, we're going to bring them back alive.
Yeah, it was around the time when the movie came out that the Soviets actually managed to send some dogs up and then bring them back alive. So that's good.
Yeah, but I agree with you. It's always been presented as a fierce competition. Every time, I mean, it's called the space race.
Yeah.
Right? It's
yeah.
not a exploration or something that doesn't have like that tone of excessive competition.
Exactly. And this was partially caused because U.S. news outlets ran with this story of Sputnik going up and made a huge deal about how they're beating us in the space race or whatever. And so that forced Eisenhower and then Kennedy to like push for more students in STEM
Mm-hmm.
and for more space stuff to catch up and surpass them.
Mm-hmm.
Kennedy wasn't all that excited about sending humans into space until the Soviets did it first, when they sent Yuri Gagarin up in 1961, in the same month as the Bay of Pigs invasion. So,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
bad month for
Yeah.
Kennedy. April
Yeah.
61. He'd only just gotten into office. Yikes.
Yeah.
So that's when he does the whole "we're going to put a person on the moon" speech, and we start getting people up there. Soviets get people up there, including, the first woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova, in 1963. And this goes back and forth until finally the U.S. gets to the moon in 1969, and then hooray, we win the space race. Everything's golden, I guess.
I guess.
Everything I've heard about this makes it sound like any form of cooperation between the U.S. and the USSR was going to be impossible.
Yeah, I think that narrative continues, Chris, even into like 2001 and 2010, the movies where they're like, oh, like our nations are fighting, but we can try and collaborate and make this happen because neither of us could do this on our own. Like that narrative is still a part going into that.
So in 1961, Kennedy gave a State of the Union address in which he invited all other nations, and specifically the USSR, to join with us in developing, I'm not going to do the voice, to join with us in developing a weather prediction program, in a new communication satellite program, and in preparation for probing the distant planets of Mars and Venus.
This would have, if this was his State of the Nation, this would have been, what, just months before he was like, we're going to be first to the moon?
Yes, you're right. So the State of the Union address happened in January, shortly after he entered office. Gagarin arrived in space in April, and he gives a speech about we're going to put a man on the moon in September. And in September of 63, Kennedy gave a speech before the UN where he wanted to ease Cold War tensions by working with the USSR on a joint lunar landing, which Khrushchev first said no to, but then he started to get interested in the idea. But then November 1963 comes around, Kennedy's assassinated, Khrushchev doesn't trust Johnson very much, and then Khrushchev gets deposed the year later. And then it simply will not happen until the Soyuz project in the 70s.
It seems amazing to me how difficult it is for nations to work together on something that has such an amazing scientific impact for everyone. And yet I also understand it, right? Like the Cold War was no joke. It was a really tense time. My mother remembers doing drills in school for what to do if there's a nuclear war strike, Like there are many things that our students today have to go through in terms of like the drills we do in school and the kinds of fears we have for their safety. But my grandparents had to deal with nuclear war being one of those drills. And so I understand why there's so much tension between nations that it's very difficult for them to work together. But how much faster could we have gotten to the moon if we had worked together? How much more exploration could we have done if we had been working together? And if other nations had gotten into that conversation earlier, because it's not just the US and the USSR, now Russia, that are working to try and put people in space and to explore space. It's so much more.
Yeah. I mean, we also see that now, right? Because the International Space Station is a joint project with a bunch of different space agencies, including Russia. And it is designed such that each country controls like a system. So like if anybody fails at their job, oops, there's the oxygen, or something like that.
Yeah. Wow.
And
whoa.
yeah, basically, I may be oversimplifying it, but that's my understanding of the basic gist of it. And so with the, let's say, political issues around Russia in the last couple years or so, the diplomatic breakdown between the two countries has influenced a lot of things. But the space station is one place where people are actually continuing to talk, and there is some line of communication. Like science often does play that role of the one sphere where people maintain contact.
And the same thing happens on these 12 to the moon, right? In the movie, all of these people end up working together. They end up doing their own parts to like protect each other as a group. They come back to the world. They try to come up with a plan together to try and unfreeze what the moon people have done, right? It is a group of scientists working together, trying to accomplish something, regardless of the political differences that the countries they come from might have with each other.
International space collaboration is cool, and I support it. And the most famous example of that is the Soyuz mission, where an American and a Soviet ship went up into space and then they docked, and it was a huge multi-year thing to make it happen, and there was all sorts of political negotiations happening between them. But that time when those two spaceships were connected, they were connected for about 2 days or so.
Mm-hmm.
That time was the 17th through the 19th of July, 1975, which is that brief window when you were born and I wasn't yet.
That's true. That is very true.
It is a very auspicious 2 weeks or so between our birthdays.
Well, it's good to know that good things happened in that time when I was an infant and not forming memories yet.
Exactly. Good things happened after you were born, and then I came around to ruin it all.
How dare you?
Hey, everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 breeding cats making fun facts about today's episode, 12 to the Moon. Go, Chris, go.
The star of Design for Dreaming has a big dance number, and we get this riff.
Cindy Williams is Twyla Tharp as Isadora Duncan in The Meredith Monk Story, a one-woman show.
Co-starring Tom Bosley as Bosley.
All right, let's do this. Cindy Williams was the Shirley in Laverne and Shirley, and she also auditioned for the role of Princess Leia, which would have been... well, it would have been different.
Cindy Williams also had a role in Son of Blob, aka Beware the Blob, a 1972 sequel to The Blob, directed by Larry Hagman. Yes, that Larry Hagman, the one who played J.R. Ewing on Dallas. Needless to say, Son of Blob is not as beloved as the original.
So Cindy Williams is Twyla Tharp, who we've mentioned before. She's a highly regarded choreographer, perhaps best known for incorporating a lot of jazz and pop music into her dance. Like, she did the choreography for the films Hair and Amadeus. And she's still alive and presumably kicking at the age of 83.
Cindy Williams is Twyla Tharp as Isadora Duncan, another choreographer, but Duncan was active at the turn of the century, like the beginning of the 20th century. Do we need to start specifying that? Anyway, she was all about breaking away from the formalism of ballet and exploring more natural human movements, and a lot of modern dance can be traced back to her.
Okay. Cindy Williams is Twyla Tharp as Isadora Duncan in The Meredith Monk Story. Meredith Monk has done some choreography, but she's mostly known as a composer and a performer. I suppose she's most famous for her 1979 album Dolmen Music, which was memorably sampled by DJ Shadow. We'll put links in the show notes, but hey, she's also still with us at the age of 81.
Cindy Williams is Twyla Tharp as Isadora Duncan in The Meredith Monk Story, a one-woman show, which, despite being a one-woman show, is co-starring Tom Bosley as Bosley? Well, Tom Bosley played Howard Cunningham on Happy Days, Richie's dad. And of course, Happy Days was what Laverne and Shirley spun off from. So, it all comes back around.
And of course, Tom Bosley was a regular on Murder, She Wrote, as well as the star of his own old person who isn't licensed to solve mysteries, nevertheless solves them show, Father Dowling Mysteries. And he was on Bonanza a few times. Okay, I guess I would let him co-star in my one-woman show.
The opening of 12 to the Moon features our old friend Francis X. Bushman, Sesom from the Phantom Planet, introducing our 12 astronauts while standing in front of a large curved table with place settings for each of them. And so we get this.
Martha Stewart planned that seating arrangement.
Judy Chicago could have done this.
When this episode aired, Martha Stewart was just settling into her first TV show, Martha Stewart Living. Despite only being on the air for a few months, she'd already been immortalized in a riff. Good job, Martha!
Judy Chicago is a feminist artist who is perhaps best known for her installation works such as The Dinner Party. This 1979 piece featured a triangular table with 39 place settings for 39 historic women. Sojourner Truth, Virginia Woolf, Christine de Pizan, and the like. The work was controversial, both to feminist critics and others, but the piece remains iconic. Oh, and Judy Chicago, still with us at the age of 85.
During the liftoff, Tom has a hard time hearing the announcer.
T-minus 27 seconds and counting. All recorders and oscillographs too fast.
Oscillographs?
Vernier start.
So the announcer was saying all recorders and oscillographs. An oscillograph is like an oscilloscope. In fact, I'm not entirely clear whether there's a difference. Either way, it's a way of measuring and monitoring voltages in an electrical system.
As the German and the Israeli drop a bomb into a volcano... Wait, what? Yeah, I guess that is what happens. Okay, well, anyway, we get this joke.
Lemon Sisters 2, Dead by Dawn.
Dead by Dawn was the subtitle to Sam Raimi's 1987 horror film Evil Dead 2, which is the sequel to 1981's The Evil Dead. Or it's a remake. Or something. I'm confused, and I don't want to watch these films because they sound scary. So if you want to explain what's going on, please feel free to write in.
And the Lennon sisters were, of course, all part of the extended Lawrence Welk family. They had some sweet harmonies and a bunch of hits throughout the 60s. And they're still with us today, ranging from the ages of 68 to 84. Look, we just love women in their 80s.
Right, but I'm pretty sure Mike said Lemon Sisters too, as in the 1990 film starring Diane Keaton and Carol Kane and Catherine Grody. They play friends who sing the girl group songs of the 60s in Atlantic City. It doesn't have very good reviews, despite, Carol Kane and Diane Keaton.
Oh, dang. Well, that's time.
So, while our astronauts are exploring the moon, we get this riff.
Hey, I see a sign that says Wall Drug 200,000 miles.
And
hey, we've been to Wall Drug.
We have been to Wall Drug.
Wow.
Wall Drug is amazing.
Okay, Wall Drug is kind of amazing. The billboards on the way to Wall Drug are significantly more amazing.
Absolutely. They are, indeed. And I can totally understand why they're throwing this riff out there, because most of the billboards that you see on the way to Wall Drug are literally in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing around, not for miles. And I can imagine that lunar landscape looked a lot like nothing for miles.
Oh, okay. So I guess for those of you who don't know what Wall Drug is, Wall, turns out, I didn't know this. I knew about Wall Drug. I didn't know that Wall was a town where Wall Drug was, and that it was named after a wall, like a geological feature that looks like a wall in the Badlands of South Dakota.
Which I totally didn't know either. I assumed Wall the town or Wall Drug must have been named after a person with that as the last name.
Yeah, Ebenezer Wall or something.
Yeah, totally. As a person with the last name of Wells, it's plausible to me that somebody could have a last name of Wall and that you would name their town right?
Absolutely
after them. But then to have it be named after a geological feature in the Badlands is like this amazing thing.
We saw the wall.
We saw the wall.
Okay, so to get to Wall Drug, you get to drive all the way across South Dakota. I mean, I guess there are other ways of doing it. You could sneak up from behind.
Yes, in which case you're driving all the way across Wyoming or Montana, right? All of these are states with lots of very large, wide open spaces with not a lot of people who have settled there.
Yeah, and not a lot of variation to the landscape. I mean, there's a very dramatic variation in the landscape of South Dakota when you get to the river.
Yes, very true.
It changes aggressively from one side to the other, and that was very nice. to see, but like, yeah, it's a really monotonous drive. And the billboards do a great job of making sure the driver doesn't fall asleep.
It's true. I mean, I was the driver on our particular journey, and I just want to say for the record, I was not in danger of falling asleep. Chris is just making a generalized point here about people in general.
Later in that trip, when we were going through a boring part of Utah, you were not in danger of falling asleep, but you were in danger of screaming.
Yes, that is entirely true. And at the time, I think you and I both remarked how a few billboards for Wall Drug would really have broken up the anger that was building throughout that entire drive. So
there are also other billboards, I should say. Other billboards are available. There are other billboards for things especially related to Mount Rushmore, which is just a little bit past Wall Drug, I suppose. But let's talk about Wall Drug, because now, okay, you get to the town of Wall, you go to Wall Drug.
Mm-hmm.
What do you find there?
So everything is the answer to that question.
And nothing at the same time.
And nothing. There's the Wall Drug facility is now like a full block of this town. It's the same size as Powell's. That doesn't give a lot of you reference, but it's a block of this town by a block, and it has 3 or 4 different sections, all of which have things like tchotchkes. You can get t-shirts, you can get keychains, you can get stickers, you can get hats. There's also a area in the back where you can see dinosaurs. There is a soda fountain in one of the sections, as well as a place where you can order some food and sit down and eat. There's a room that has a lineup of stuffed rabbits' heads with little antlers on them. These are jackalopes.
Yes.
Right? Not real, but very real animals in South Dakota.
Sure, yes.
Right? And just, it is full of, I mean, I want to say it's full of crap that you can buy, but it's not crap, right?
No, like it's mostly crap.
You can get postcards and shot glasses and novelty shot glasses and pint glasses and novelty pint glasses. And like,
the problem I had with Wall Drug was that 95% of what they had for sale was the same tat you can get everywhere. Later on our journey, we went to an unexpected stop, which didn't have nearly as many billboards warning us, but did have a few. We went to Buc-ee's, which is a Texas chain of gas stations and places where you can buy a lot of crap. There's one in Colorado. That's the one that we went to. Mm-hmm. I had heard about this place. I'd never been there, much like Wall Drug. And that was exactly what I wanted Wall Drug to be more like.
Sure.
Just endless amounts of branded merchandise that was somehow appealing, because Buc-ee's, they've got this like beaver as a mascot and he's adorable. He was there that day. We got to see him, the real Buc-ee. He was wonderful.
Buc-ee's was like a jump scare in a horror movie. We didn't know it was going to be there. We walked inside. It was so sensorily overwhelming that my response was immediately fight or flight, and I had to calm myself down. I mean, it was a very difficult day of driving anyway, but it was also just this big warehouse where there were people chanting something together and screaming like football hooligans in the back of the room. And everything was so bright and tacky and overwhelming in every sort of way. Like that, it was a jump scare in a horror movie. Whereas Wall Drug, they warn you.
Yeah, they do warn you.
You have thousands of miles of a warning, and they're calling you in and beckoning you. They're beckoning you in with free ice water. With
yes, and 5-cent coffee, which I did have and was worth every penny.
Yes, it was my nickel, by the way. Of course it was worth every penny.
It was worth every one of your pennies. Thank you, Patreon supporters, for giving me that nickel through Charlotte. And it's also true that the sensory overload of Wall Drug was a blessed relief after the absolute tedium of driving across South Dakota, right? So it was a different kind of shock to the system rather than the highways of Colorado, which were already busy, and it was a nasty day for driving and all that stuff. But there was just better stuff to look at in the Bucky's I found. The wall drug, there was some good stuff. There was like all sorts of little like the different brands that the ranchers have, all the different symbols of the double.
That was super
U's and all
cool.
that.
Yes.
That was very cool. There were a few other cool ththings. The jackalopes were cool.
Yeah.
But most of it was like little keychains with your nephew's name on it. And like, yeah, you can get that anywhere.
It's true, but they won't say wall drug on the other side.
They didn't say wall drug on the other side on these either. Many of them, some did, but many of them didn't.
You're right. I appreciated that the wall drug was in like compartments. So it wasn't just like one enormous warehouse with the reverberating sounds of hooliganism. It was like you're in the place where you get your cup of coffee and you sit down. You're in the place where you get your postcards and you get your aspirin, and fabulous. Like, I appreciate that there were different sections.
It was an absolute maze of small, cramped, overstuffed rooms that were loud. It is a different vibe than the warehouse of loud, it's true, but
Well, Chris, we have traveled the nation to see Wall Drug and talked about concept cars, and I don't know what else we could bring up when our movie was about traveling to the moon, but I think you might have a final factoid for us. Do you?
I do. Let's return back to our short for a moment.
Good, because I don't want to talk about the 12 to the moon anymore.
Sure. So there's a few familiar faces or voices in the short. The man singing is Thurl Ravenscroft, you know, the guy who sang You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch.
Oh, yes.
But that's not the man who's dancing on the screen. That is a guy named Mark Breaux. I assume it's pronounced Breaux. And he was a dancer and choreographer who did a bunch of different things. One of the films that he did the choreography for is a film that, for some reason, we haven't talked about yet, despite it being even bigger for you than Bonanza. The Sound of Music.
Stop it. You're right. That is bigger for me than Bonanza. You were leading into that, and I'm just like, I don't know if there's anything bigger than Bonanza for me, but you were totally right. The Sound of Music is. We did talk about it a little bit because there was the riff in one of the previous movies about all of the Fräulein Marias coming over the hill going, the hills are alive, the hills are alive, the hills are alive.
Oh, yes. So do you have any favorite choreography other than the time when hundreds of Marias came spinning over the hill?
I mean, you know, you do have the iconic Julie Andrews spinning on the mountain. But no, I'm going to have to say, like, my favorite choreography is probably with the kids doing their So Long Farewell Goodnight song. Because it's super cute. It's really, and of course, you know, I love it when Fräulein Maria is dancing with Captain Von Trapp and they're doing the Austrian dance. But I can't imagine that that's something that was choreographed, like a brand new dance. That it must have been a traditional dance, right? They wouldn't make, stop it. They do make up like traditional songs because Edelweiss didn't exist.
Not a thing.
So, you know, we've just made a cultural moment for another country anyway. Why not make up a folk dance?
By the way, I feel like we can't let this episode go by without shouting out Bridget for her performance as Nivina in the episode, in the sketches, which is probably the hardest anyone has had to ever act on that show. She is dancing 125%.
Every single moment that she is on screen, it's amazing.
Every little gesture she does is perfect and amazing, and I love all of it. And the singing that she comes up with is also fantastic. She absolutely nails this performance.
100% agree. This sketch would have been a disaster if she hadn't sold it as hard as she sold that role. That was amazing. If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you only understand us when we're singing, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our email is info@itsjustashow.com, and we would love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you and like our randomly selected supporter, Maria. Thank you, Maria. For as little as $1 an episode, you can be like Maria and help us research and record this show. You can join us in a friendly Discord, and you can listen to all of our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/160. Chris, excited listeners want to know, will we be continuing our travel through the planets on our next episode?
I mean, in as much as we're going back to the moon for a short with some radar men, because we're going to be doing season 1, episode 8, The Slime People, with yet another episode of Radar Men from the Moon.
Well, I can't say I'm excited for the radar men from the moon, but the slime people, that sounds exciting.
We'll get to talk about slime and gack and all sorts of fun things. But until then,
snuggle in, mein schnoodle pants.
I hate map makers. Take it away, Theme Squad. For now, that's the end.
This is what women are going to do when they have extra time?